I think this shit is pissing me off. And I don't know now, but I'll know in a month, cause I'm
I need now you're gonna leave with nothing but a sign. Another evening I'll be sitting reading in between your lines, because I miss you all the time. So get away, another way to feel what you do on yourself, to know and let yourself go. You know you do lose your self-control. There's snow under the rainbow. Turn away, another way to be where you do let yourself go, let yourself go. It's like so what do you wanna do? What's your point of view? There's no point scared. Do you wanna get out? Handshake with you. What's your point of view? I wanna talk with you. I don't wanna get, 'cause I really wanna stay at your house in the palace in Luxor. But you know how much you brought me all on. Don't you worry, don't you wanna know. And I'm aware that you were lying in the gutter, 'cause I did everything to be there by your side. So when you tell me I'm the reason, I just can't believe the lies. And why do I so wanna call you? So what do you wanna do? What's your point of view? There's no point scared. Do you wanna get out? Handshake with you. What's your point of view? I wanna talk with you. I don't wanna get, 'cause I really wanna stay at your house in the palace in Luxor. But you know how much you brought me all on. Don't you worry, don't you wanna know.
Photo suit $82.99.
The video game cartridge is an icon in video game history. It changed how we play games. It gave players a physical representation of video game software. But the console that introduced cartridges, the Fairchild Channel F, has become a mere footnote in video game history. But the story of the Channel F deserves more than just a footnote. The team behind the console were the first to figure out how to make, market, and sell games based on the game itself, not the technology behind it. The Channel F is a tale of a hardworking team on the edge of innovation, and many of the people involved would go on to play significant roles in the early years of the video game industry. This is the story of how the video game cartridge was made. Our story begins in a place far from the center of technology, the state of Connecticut. In the 1960s, bowling company AMF established a research and development group in the state to explore automation using computers. One of the engineers working there was Norman Alpert, a trained electronics engineer who successfully led projects for a computer-based food ordering system and automatic score trackers for bowling lanes. In 1968, AMF moved their R&D facilities out of Connecticut to South Carolina. But Alpert didn't want to move, so he and a few fellow engineers split off to form their own company aimed at creating computer-controlled devices. They called it Alpex Computer, named after Alpert. In the following years, Alpex entered into an agreement with the company Pitney Bowes to create a computerized cash register. The project did not go well. Competition from other firms and a fallout between the companies in late 1973 left Alpex in deep financial debt. They laid off nearly all of their employees and didn't have any idea what to do next. That was until one of the co-founders, Wallace Kirshner, spoke up. What about doing video games? Video games, sometimes called TV games, were brand new in the early 1970s. Computer Space and Pong arrived only a few years earlier and made their mark on the arcade game industry. However, Kirshner was more familiar with Magnavox's Odyssey, the first home video game console, released in 1972. Though not as advanced as the arcade games, the Odyssey did have one big advantage: the ability to play many different types of games. Circuit cards were used to unlock the system's limited features. However, hardware could only go so far. There were now better ways to add games to a system. Alpex's cash register system contained an Intel microprocessor, a small chip which could run computer programs. To that point, nobody had created a commercial video game that ran off of a microprocessor, which made sense. CPUs were expensive, and not many people knew how to program for such a limited computer. Creating a video game console that could run software would be a huge technological breakthrough. Knowing that others were likely working on the same idea, Alpex felt pressure to develop the concept quickly. They brought in software engineer Lawrence Haskell, who had worked with Norman Alpert at AMF and on the Alpex cash register project. Haskell and Kirshner determined that they could create a game system robust enough to play many small, simple games. The console would be based around an Intel 8-bit microprocessor and have a small amount of memory. Since memory was expensive, they limited their games to less than 256 bytes in size, less than a few lines of text per game. In 1974, Project Raven was underway, a codename which stood for Remote Access Video Entertainment. The console used a calculator keypad to control the games. To draw the graphics, the engineers implemented an advanced method of drawing the screen, called a bitmap. The Raven system divided the screen into a grid of pixels, providing a nearly endless amount of graphical possibilities. Even though it was only in black and white, this opened the door for any type of game to be made for the console. For his first game, Lawrence Haskell took the best elements of the Odyssey ping pong game and Atari's Pong, and created a game that more closely resembled hockey. Unlike other ball and paddle games, the paddles could be rotated, and each player had a goalie. With the ability to move the paddle all around the screen, it was an intense and competitive game which, in some ways, was better than what was available in the arcade. Wallace Kirshner later said, "To this day, I still think that is the most challenging game that I've played." A killer app was born. It would be the first of many games for the console, but the team knew that they wouldn't be able to make every game available inside the hardware like on the Odyssey. They didn't want the console to be limited by what they developed before release. In order to solve this problem, they needed a type of media that could load games onto their hardware. Standard storage methods on computers like floppy disks and paper tape were expensive, slow, and easily damaged by consumers. They needed a solution that would allow them to safely and quickly transfer data onto the system. Other electronics, such as programmable calculators, used cards, but Alpex took a different approach. They combined circuit boards that were plugged into larger computers with a plastic outer casing, borrowed from new types of media storage. Film and music were now being stored in special cases which protected their fragile tapes within from damage. The cases were often called cassettes, but sometimes called cartridges.
We went to Radio Shack and we bought these little plastic boxes, and we were able to plug the little box into the console with a connector we put on it. Wallace Kirshner.
It was the first video game cartridge, and it was a revolutionary idea. The bosses at Alpex knew that they could sell the concept to a company that had the money to make their idea a reality. Since Magnavox had taken a chance on the Odyssey, Alpex approached other television companies about the idea. Alpert and Kirshner gave demonstrations to RCA, Zenith, and Sylvania, but none of them were interested. The Odyssey had not done particularly well, and by 1975, even video games in the arcade were struggling. Nobody expected much from the video game market. Alpex would not give up easily, though. They tried a new tactic, approaching companies in the consumer electronics market. Recently, a boom in pocket calculators had created a buzz in the microchip industry. Some of the chip companies were even beginning to eye video games. Alpex bought components from those electronics manufacturers, so they pitched the idea to some of their parts suppliers. They eventually found an interested partner in Fairchild Semiconductor. Fairchild was one of the premier companies in the area, becoming known as Silicon Valley. From their origins in the 1950s, Fairchild had been at the forefront of several important innovations in electronics. However, by the 1970s, the company was struggling. They were slow to adapt to cutting-edge technology, and many of their founders departed to form other companies, like Intel. In addition, they missed out on the calculator market, which was making a lot of money for other chip companies. Fairchild wanted to reassert itself as a major supplier of microchips. They had two products on the horizon they wanted to sell. The first were digital watches, the latest electronic product craze. The second was their very own microprocessor set, the Fairchild F8, which consisted of two separate chips. The company was looking for more products to market, so when Alpex pitched their video game system, they were intrigued. Additionally, they happened to know an engineer in the company who was experienced with video games. So they asked him to be involved with the project. His name was Gerald Anderson Lawson, but most people referred to him as Jerry. Lawson hailed from Brooklyn, New York. Growing up, he taught himself electronics by tinkering with radios and televisions. After leaving college without a degree and working odd jobs up and down the East Coast, Lawson headed out west for better opportunities. He worked on electronics in Silicon Valley before eventually landing a job at Fairchild. Lawson stood out among his co-workers. At the time, he was one of only a few black engineers working in the industry and stood a towering 6'6". The 34-year-old Lawson also knew a lot about fun and games. He had played Computer Space and seen the future of video games. He got to know the people at Atari while they were building the first units of Pong. And while attending meetings at the pioneering Homebrew Computer Club in California, he made his very own arcade game in his garage using the Fairchild F8 microprocessor. After he sold the game to an arcade company, his bosses found out about this moonlighting job. He could have been in serious trouble, but instead, he was drafted into the secret project of evaluating the Alpex Raven console. Alongside him would be Gene Landrum, an independent marketer who previously worked at Fairchild rival National Semiconductor. In late 1975, Lawson and Landrum flew into Connecticut to view the Raven system. It didn't look like much. The hardware was stuffed inside a metal box, and the keypad controller was confusing. However, the games were impressive. On top of the hockey game, Haskell created several other games, including tic-tac-toe, a shooting gallery game, and a doodling program. Lawson and Landrum determined that if they could properly present the system to Fairchild management, it could be huge. By the time the two flew back from Connecticut, video games were once again on everybody's minds. For 1975, Atari, Magnavox, and several other companies produced consoles that played variations on the Pong arcade game. While some of them had different versions of the game, all of them were built into the system like the Odyssey. Pong consoles became the surprise hit of the 1975 holiday season. Suddenly, many companies were now interested in the video game market. Making a console with better technology suddenly made a lot more sense for Fairchild. In November of 1975, Gene Landrum wrote up a market study to convince the executives at Fairchild to enter the video game market. He predicted that the company could easily sell 200,000 consoles in their first year, and potentially millions more in following years. It could cost as little as $100, the price of Atari's home Pong system, but offer better quality games and the potential to sell more games throughout the year via cartridges. Jerry Lawson also worked with industrial designer Nicholas Tollesfor to envision a new controller for the system. What they came up with was halfway between an arcade joystick and an explosives detonator. It featured a top piece that could rotate, be pulled up or down, and pushed in 8 directions. It was a futuristic design that communicated how their games would be different from the competition. After some consideration, Fairchild made the call. They were going to make the very first programmable home video game console. In February of 1976, they signed a deal with Alpex for a non-exclusive license to their Raven patents for 2 years. A new player was about to enter video games. For their new console project, Fairchild management named Jerry Lawson the head electronics engineer. Fellow engineer Ron Smith would handle the physical designs. Their first order of business was to convert the Alpex Raven system to use the Fairchild F8 microprocessor set, rather than Intel's. Lawrence Haskell would reprogram his games, and in the process, upgrade them from black and white to color. Very few video games in 1976 were in true color, even in the arcade. It was yet another showcase of the console's impressive technology. The team decided that the hockey game and a similar tennis game would be built into the system, providing value even to people who didn't purchase any cartridges. As Haskell recoded his other demos, he also found time to add a few colorful additions. In the tic-tac-toe game, for example, he added a small reference to Lawson, who was fond of using the word turkey as an insult. This screen became something of a calling card for Fairchild's new console. It had personality. The team also decided, with ROM prices coming down, that they could implement multiple small games onto single cartridges. They hired programmers and brought in others from within Fairchild to create new titles. One of them, called Desert Fox, was similar to Atari's Tank arcade game, and Lawson, along with 2 of the designers of the F8 microprocessor, programmed an impressive blackjack game they considered to be a standout for the system. However, a big challenge still lay in front of the team. The cartridges Alpex created were not ready for prime time. The edge connectors stuck out and could be easily broken if used aggressively by children or adults. A consumer needed to be protected from their own ignorance of the complex electronics inside the cartridge. The Fairchild team needed something similar to the Odyssey circuit cards, which could be inserted and removed repeatedly without failing due to static shocks or loose connections. Nicholas Tollesfor, who had helped design the controller, drew on the design of an 8-track music cartridge for their game shells. It would be vertically oriented, stuck into the front of the system and easily removable using grip lines at the top of the plastic. Inside the cartridge, a circuit board and gold-plated contacts were hidden by a small plastic cover. These would hook onto a set of connectors inside the console, which were pressed down for a firm connection, secured with a latch. Fellow designer Ron Smith created the mechanism, which made it impossible for a consumer to accidentally put the cartridge in the wrong way or damage the electronics inside. Smith also designed the look of the console. He made the controllers a reality, though they were permanently attached to the system to save on money and parts. To compensate for the inconvenience, he made sure the wires were extra long, so players wouldn't have to sit too close to the television. Perhaps the oddest decision for the console was a built-in speaker. All sounds came out of the console rather than the television. Lawson's team worked on the console for 6 months, ignoring the usual bureaucratic procedures of making a product within a large company like Fairchild. Some managers were concerned, but Lawson held firm.
When you break new horizons, you have to break some rules. And we were rule breakers. We were known as Mavericks, crazy guys. Jerry Lawson.
His team defined the whole system, from its look to its functionalities. On the front of the console, a series of 5 buttons could be used to select a game, reset, choose a different mode, or even pause the action, an entirely new feature for video games. All of these advances came at a cost, literally. Missing their intended target of $100, the console would retail for $150, equivalent to nearly $800 today. Each individual cartridge, called video carts, cost an additional $20. Cartridges contained 1 to 4 games, and each game featured user options for time or difficulty. Video carts were each given a number, with the promise of countless more to come in the future. It seemed like a foolproof plan. In June of 1976, at the Summer Consumer Electronics Show in Chicago, Fairchild unveiled their first video game console, the Video Entertainment System, or VES. Other game companies at the show were shocked. A new future had come to video games. Some of the other game companies were even exploring similar ideas, but Fairchild arrived there first. Jerry Lawson recalled not being able to move from his booth because it was so crowded, with people eager to see what they had made. The console had a sleek design, similar to a stereo system of the 1970s. The cartridge style was unique and were colorfully illustrated by commercial artist Tom Kamifuji. 3 cartridges would be available at the system's launch: a 4-game cartridge featuring Lawrence Haskell's games, a shooting game cartridge with a rolling target game and the Desert Fox tank game, plus the impressive Blackjack cartridge. Fairchild came away from the Consumer Electronics Show feeling confident. They lined up orders for their console and prepared for a launch date of late August 1976. Everything was in place for Fairchild to take over the video game market. Then, the hammer came crashing down. In the United States, all electronic products that were to be sold at retail had to pass a test from the Federal Communications Commission, the FCC. The FCC tested for signals which could radiate off of electronic devices, potentially blocking broadcasts of radio, television, or even police bulletins. Many companies that wanted to launch home consoles in 1975 were unable to, due to failing the FCC's very strict standards. Lawson submitted the VES for emission testing at the FCC lab in Washington, D.C. a few weeks after the Consumer Electronics Show. In August, they were told the bad news. The console had failed testing. Fairchild couldn't put it on the market. Fairchild's technical team was left scrambling for a solution. They tried everything they could think of to cut down on the radiation. Lawson thought he solved the problem by shortening the length of the controller cables, but it didn't cut down the emissions enough. Every day the console was delayed was another day Fairchild couldn't manufacture it. and another day that competitors could catch up to them. Lawson stayed in the FCC offices every day, calling back to the office to give suggestions, until they finally landed on a solution. To prevent the electrical signals from leaking out, the entire inside of the system would have to be encased in metal shielding. It was an expensive fix, but it finally got them over the hurdle. In October of 1976, Fairchild could finally start producing the console. With barely any time left in the year to create systems or games, Fairchild did what they could to meet shipments for the 1976 holiday buying season. Because they needed to prioritize making consoles available, the additional cartridges were left by the wayside. Only the first cartridge, Video Cart 1, could be picked up at the delayed launch in November. Sales results were underwhelming. While 1976 would be successful for other home video game consoles, with over 3.5 million systems sold, the Fairchild Video Entertainment System only sold 50,000 units by the end of the year. On the day after Christmas of 1976, the Fairchild Semiconductor Customer Support Center started receiving calls. Jerry Lawson, who was in the office finishing up some paperwork, started answering the phones. People were confused about their consoles. One man took apart the entire machine looking for a place to put batteries, even though it had a power cord. Others tried to shove the game cartridges into 8-track players and 8-track tapes into the console. Nobody had ever experienced anything like this before.
Towards the end of the day, I was getting a little frazzled. A woman called up and she said, "My game hums. Do you know why?" I said, "'Cause it don't know the words, lady. Bye." Jerry Lawson.
Even with all the customer calls, the launch of the Fairchild VES was still disappointing. But there were still reasons to be optimistic. The console sold out wherever it was available, and retailers were eager to have more. Reviews for the system were positive, saying that it offered more value than most of the other consoles available on the market. Once the cartridges were in stock, they sold well, and the team behind the VES hired additional programmers to create even more games for 1977. There was still a chance to rule in the new, programmable video game market. However, Fairchild did not feel like they could compete. In the holiday season of 1976, they also sold their new digital watches and wound up producing too many. They were stuck with excess inventory, leaving the company on unstable ground. Fairchild was also forced to increase the price of the VES from $150 to $170 after Christmas, due to the cost of the extra shielding they installed to comply with the FCC. Finally, even by the early part of 1977, competitors like RCA were creating their own cartridge-based consoles, getting around Fairchild's patents on the technology. Competition was coming, and the company was not willing to risk producing too many consoles or cartridges. The console team shifted their strategy to try and gain more support. The name of the console was changed to a more marketable one, the Fairchild Channel F. In advertising, the F stood for fun. It mirrored the idea of a TV channel with many different types of programs, spelling out the advantages of buying a cartridge system. They also began to provide games with more value than doodling or blackjack, mirroring hits in the arcade. There were games like Spitfire, Dragstrip, Baseball, and Maze, which were all far more impressive than what they provided at launch. However, their weak start made the Channel F easy to dismiss when Atari entered the cartridge market in late 1977. Atari's Video Computer System, or VCS, later known as the Atari 2600, retailed for around the same price as the Channel F. Their cartridge was designed by someone who had briefly consulted with Ron Smith on the Channel F cartridge design. Though Atari was not first to the market, they had a large library of games out of the gate, most of them based around their own popular arcade titles and clones of other companies' games. In 1977, Atari sold more than 300,000 of their new VCS consoles. By comparison, Fairchild sold 100,000 Channel F consoles, only double the amount from 1976. The name of the Atari system also reflected a new, rising market in personal computers. Several companies were exploring the idea of providing value by making their game systems function more like computers. This idea particularly appealed to parents. Fairchild decided to follow suit. In 1977, they released several educational titles and adult-targeted board games. Then, in 1978, the company redesigned their machine, calling it the Channel F System 2. While it was the same console, not new hardware, it had a new look and was cheaper to manufacture than the previous system. They removed the internal speaker, allowing the sound to come through the television, and used less internal shielding to keep the price down. Hoping that this new model would reverse their fortunes, they began to advertise the potential of using keypads with the console, which would help kids learn how to program in a new, computer-centric world. But it wasn't enough to keep up with Atari and other competitors. Jerry Lawson and the Channel F team begged for increased support, but Fairchild wouldn't budge. The previous year, the console market suffered an overproduction problem, and Pong consoles were sold at a discount. That scared the Fairchild executives. While the company continued to produce games and market the Channel F, they were fearful of committing fully to the console. Even with the Channel F selling out each year, it wasn't enough to persuade Fairchild to risk making too many units. The marketing team tried to be creative. They marketed the system in both Japan and the UK, and continued to push their library of games which competed well with Atari's early offerings. They also made price cuts to the system to encourage software sales as the number of games continued to increase. The Channel F team also experienced a stroke of luck. A television producer came to them to pitch a series called TV Pow, an interactive game show that people could play from home using their voice. And the gameplay system ran on Channel F consoles and games. The concept was introduced on live TV by Regis Philbin and was subsequently picked up by numerous local television stations starting in October of 1978. They hoped the show could potentially help increase sales of the console, but despite the potential, it did not improve the situation for Fairchild. By the end of 1978, Fairchild no longer had any lead on their innovations. Numerous companies had entered the cartridge market and were offering more exciting possibilities. Bally and Magnavox were already outshining them. Soon, Mattel would enter the fray with a much more advanced Intellivision. The Channel F only increased in sales another 50,000 units that year, totaling just 300,000 over 3 years. Meanwhile, Atari sold more than 500,000 consoles in 1978 alone. There was no longer any place left in the market for Fairchild. The company still hoped to announce several new cartridges at the 1979 Winter Consumer Electronics Show. However, they canceled their appearance at the last second. Before long, the people working in Jerry Lawson's group were told the bad news. Fairchild was exiting consumer electronics, including video games. The Channel F project was shut down. In the aftermath of the decision to cancel the Channel F, Fairchild sold their remaining inventory to Zircon International, inventors of the Stud Finder. Zircon would later ship some of the Channel F games intended for release in 1979. They even created a few new games, sometimes calling on the fired Fairchild programmers for their expertise. They continued selling the system up until the video game crash in the early 1980s. Fairchild was acquired by another company and never achieved its ambition of being on the cutting edge of consumer electronics. However, the Fairchild Channel F, the video entertainment system, and Project Raven cast a long shadow. Despite their failure, the innovative marketing techniques used to sell the Channel F's cartridges opened up an entirely new way for people to play and purchase video games. Atari used the technique of advertising multiple games per cartridge, making their early library seem bigger than it truly was. Fairchild's custom in-store displays would be imitated by future companies to show off systems to potential buyers. Even TV POW would continue to air on various stations, though the console would eventually switch to the Mattel Intellivision. More important were the legacies of the people who helped the Channel F during its lifetime. Gene Landrum, the marketer who convinced Fairchild to go forward with the console, later completed a market study for Atari and was brought into their consumer division. He later helped make the concept of the Chuck E. Cheese arcade restaurant a reality. Later, a young MBA student named Trip Hawkins assisted in a Fairchild marketing study. He would go on to found Electronic Arts. Several Fairchild engineers would play an important role in the explosion of the home video game industry. The designers of the Channel F cartridge, Ron Smith and Nicholas Tollisfor, helped the first third-party developer, Activision, develop a cartridge which got around Atari's patents for the VCS. One of Fairchild's game designers, Rich Marr, who created several games for the Channel F, moved to making games for Atari. He produced the first massive home video game hit on their system in 1980, Space Invaders. The game made cartridge video games a huge business overnight. The head engineer on the Channel F, Jerry Lawson, started his own third-party video game development company called VideoSoft in 1982. They produced a number of games and test equipment for the Atari system, including games utilizing 3D glasses. Sadly, the games never saw a commercial release. In the mid-2000s, Lawson was recognized for his role in leading the engineers behind the first video game cartridge. He passed away in 2011 at the age of 70. What about Alpex Computer, the company that created the idea of the cartridge to begin with? Wallace Kirshner and Lawrence Haskell helped develop the Coleco Telstar, one of the most popular Pong consoles of 1976. However, their innovations couldn't override Alpex's massive debt. The company was sold to investors in 1979, and co-founder Norman Alpert passed away in 1981. Alpex's creditors used the company's patents for bitmapped graphics to threaten legal action against other console makers like Atari. In 1994, they successfully sued Nintendo for a $200 million judgment. However, Nintendo was able to overturn the ruling, as well as defend themselves from Fairchild's claim to the cartridge design on the original Nintendo Entertainment System. The Channel F story proves that being first is not enough. Without the parent company's desire to be in video games, the people who brought the first modern video game console to market had no chance of succeeding. However, sometimes invention stands on its own, and many of the people who invented the Channel F can be called important creators in the history of video games. That's all for this episode of The Gaming Historian. Thanks for watching.
The one with all the fun. The Fairchild Video Entertainment System at your larger JCPenney. The home entertainment system that never gets old. Plug in a new video card and change the fun. Play
Black again.
Should I kneel? Will I fall apart? Maybe that's I pretend that I'm queen of a castle that's tumbling around my feet, and in my heart it's there, standing tall enough to fix it all. It's just a new beginning, it's just a different ending. It's just beginning. It's just beginning. It's just beginning. It's just beginning. It's you see. Watch as I
With me, 'cause you know I'm borrowing right now.
town swimming in blood. Pencil ribbons dancing in the rain. Flowers on the skyline, hey, how is the wine? What comes round's going round again. Towers coming up for air. I couldn't see, I was blind. Off in the corner, doing poet's work, that's alright for now. It was just a dream of your blue eyes. I couldn't see, I was blind. Off in the corner, doing poet's work, that's alright for now. It was just a dream of your blue eyes. Tinseltown dripping in blood. Tinsel women dancing in the wind. Dead flowers on the skyline. Hey, how was the wine, baby? What comes round's going round again. Now let me tell you about the dream. I had no feeling, I had no past. I was the artist, I was the vast spaces without reprieve. I was a dreamer, watch me be. 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 I was a dreamer, watch me be.
I was the arrow train that I'm hoping to catch. Now that we're here, I'm ready to leave this whole wide world behind. Now in the twilight of the psychedelic years, roll back the highlights till the dancer disappears, till the dancer disappears. Bring back the magic and light the match. There's a spark that I'm hoping will catch. Now that we're here, I'm ready to leave this whole wide world behind. Now in the twilight of the psychedelic years, roll back the highlights till the dancer disappears, till the dancer disappears.
The sun beating down on my face, sweat runs from my spine to the base, and in the summertime I don't mind, I can go with whatever you say. There is no other time. sad love. Maybe I've been gone. Please don't ask me why. Please don't ask me why. Please don't ask me why. Please Why must everything feel like an uphill battle? I wanna make a tape for my best friend's label. Gotta make some changes. How I spend my savings, and all of this is on me in this down economy. Like a citizen of your club, it's one of many places where people get shot up. Party people stop and stare. Gotta make some changes. People that I'm trusting, and all of this is on me in this down economy. Gotta make some changes where I run my shipments. I keep an eye on you in this down economy. Such things require that you're thorough with everyone. Don't fret if you say, gotta make some changes. Words that I'm using. Seems like this house was built around a haunting.
Try to live, but you only shadow. Try to find yourself. Going nowhere when you don't know who to follow. Moving to the river's edge. Right to the stars.